Hi, hello everyone. My name is Chia, and I support the Tonic members in the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions. I also recently completed my master's thesis analyzing different investment policy statements of impacted investors, thanks to support from the Tonic members like yourselves. So throughout the research, I reviewed more than 35 examples, and in these lessons, I'll just share some quick learnings on how these approaches to catalytic capital can be expressed in your investment policy statement. Just to give a quick overview, what is an investment policy statement? It's a formal document of how your investment portfolio should be managed, which includes your investment principles, approaches, it includes the division of responsibilities and so forth. In some countries, the IPS is a legal requirement for clients of financial advisors or wealth managers as a way to document explicitly to them your investment guidelines. But if not, it is still a useful document for an internal team, or even if you make all decisions yourself in order to clarify your investment principles. So based on that, I guess you can tell that an IPS, is strictly tailored to the preferences, attitudes, and situation of each investor. And therefore, there is no boilerplate IPS. But there's a lot of research and guides on what each of these documents should contain, which I reviewed in my research. And through that, kind of identified 4 of the key sections of the IPS for a typical investor. And within them, there are different topics that impact investors can leverage on. The 4 sections we'll talk about briefly today is the objectives, asset allocation and investment strategies, responsibilities, and last but not least, the evaluation part. As mentioned, there's a lot that you can talk about in the IPS, but in this lesson, I'll just focus on those elements of the IPS that are applicable to catalytic capital. So moving on to the first section, the objective section is the introductory section of the IPS, but there's a lot of really important information that's here. Some of the topics in this section may include the scope of the policy, your vision, mission, or value statement, reflecting your motivations and investment philosophies and goals. You may also define some of your investment strategies here, or if you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion objective, either for the portfolio as a whole or just for the catalytic portion, you can also include those in the objective section. Why you should make your objective explicit in the IPS? Because it provides a clear statement that can help with consistent implementation over time. So first up on the objective section, here are some of the topics that are related to catalytic capital. And the first one is defining what you mean by catalytic. This is the place where you can set out what you mean is catalytic, since that varies from investor to investor. What do you aim to achieve with your catalytic investments, and how does that differ from your goals and other parts of your portfolio? So for example, we heard the 2 testimonials earlier from Greg and Amy, and Greg provided a clear description of how Kenya approaches different objectives across the spectrum of capital, from broad responsible investments to what they call impact first investments. The objective session also often includes vision, mission of the investor to serve as a guiding principle for investment decisions. For example, Amy expressed her mission to invest in businesses that deliver services and products that improve the well-being of people on the planet. And Greg shared that Kenya's mission is to fund market-based solutions that directly benefit underserved, primarily rural communities. Including these statements in the objective section should be a reminder of those goals when making individual investment decisions. If you recall in the video, Amy also shared that she invests in a diverse first-time managers so that they can build a track record and attract additional capital. And since this is something that most advisors would advise against, Amy can make that intention of her catalytic strategy explicit by including it as part of her investment thesis in this section of the IPS. She can also include any limits to that approach she would like to apply. Last but not least, in this section, you can outline your portfolio goals, which is broadly categorized as financial goals or impact goals. You can outline under what circumstances you're open to providing a financial subsidy or concession, or when will you be willing to accept a higher risk profile or longer time horizons in order to achieve this impact. So Greg shared that the financial return for Kenya, the financial return expectation for Kenya is to produce measurable social outcomes while preserving the capital base. And what that means for them is to generate between 3 to 5% annually. So this is where you can outline this kind of information in the IPS. I'm also including here an example. So if you want to include this in your IPS, you can consider using similar language, which says like, a higher impact investment can justify a lower than market rate financial return or a higher risk profile. So that's it for the first section. The second section is on asset allocation and investment strategies. So whatever these guidelines that you will outline here in these sections are driven by liquidity needs, risk tolerances, and suitability. And these are built upon what was initially set forth in your objective section. So here's where you could state whether your approach is to gradually integrate catalytic investments in a main portfolio over time, or to segregate them and manage them distinctly. Your asset allocation strategy, for example, will be affected by your plan. For example, if you focus on community investing, it might require larger cash components, or if you have specific catalytic goals that may be best achieved through allocation to specific assets. So you would typically define the investment objectives for each strategy in the objective sections, and in this section express the asset allocation to meet those objectives. So for Kenyard, again, Greg said that almost all of the portfolio is invested catalytically across asset classes, but for Amy, as we heard, she has a market rate trust, which is values aligned, but does most of her catalytic investments through her retirement accounts and donor advised funds. If you have a transition plan of some sort, you can also consider to include them in this section. We heard from Greg that Kenyard is divesting from responsible investments, which is something that he has already defined in these objective sections, and moving that capital to what they call impact first investments. So that's pretty much it that we want to cover for the second section. So moving on to the third section, which is on responsibilities. This section of the IPS is just to provide clarity on the roles and responsibilities in the management of the portfolio. For example, who is responsible for particular elements of execution and monitoring. Will you, as a principal, play a more active role in evaluating potential catalytic investments, like Amy? Or what kind of roles will others play with regard to catalytic investments and activities? So, for example, Amy described the different roles that her 3 advisors play. She relies on her network of peers as well as her 2 kind of impact first advisors for most of her catalytic investments, but she has 1 main advisor that handles all of the administration of all of her investments. So this is the kind of thing that should be reflected in this section, and it can provide clarity to the advisors on their role and avoid overlapping responsibilities. So one important thing in the IPS is fiduciary duty. This is the section where you can also express your expectations regarding fiduciary duty. Many advisors assume that making below market rate investments could be a breach of their fiduciary duty. So if you believe otherwise in your catalytic investment, this is the place to say otherwise. Amy's advisors may be concerned, for example, about the liability if they invest in first-time managers, and she can allay these concerns by outlining in this section that she considers doing so to be within and not a breach of fiduciary duty. So here's another example excerpt from one of the IPSs that I reviewed, which says that fiduciary responsibility must include integration of prudent financial management practices with principles of environmental stewardship, concern for the community, and corporate accountability to shareholders and stakeholders alike. So you can consider including similar languages in your investment policy statement. Moving on to the last section of the IPS, it's last but not least, in the evaluation section, you can include your expectation on impact reporting and also decide how you want to share publicly in line with your advocacy goals. So in my research, I found that this section was omitted by many IPSs, but the few that did include this section provided very relevant and significant details on their expectations on impact reporting. So there's nothing really unique about impact reporting for catalytic investments, except the fact that impact reporting should probably be more important to you in these investments in which you are providing an implied financial subsidy. So if that is true of you, you could say so here. And with regards to public sharing, you can express here in the last section of your IPS what you would like to share publicly as part of your leadership in the growth of catalytic investing. So Greg was really open about sharing kind of their experience in catalytic investments. And if this is something that's of interest to you, you can also include this in your IPS. I've provided here another example excerpt from one of the IPSs that I've reviewed, and says, basically, we seek to leverage our work through collaborative investing, co-investment, syndication, and knowledge sharing. And to that end, when legally permitted, this organization or you will share information on investment opportunities, portfolio performance, and market conditions with like-minded investors. So if you would also, on top of deploying catalytic capitals, would want to be an advocate for catalytic investments, can consider including similar language in your investment policy statement. So that's it for a quick overview of the IPS. Right now, the next steps for you, is just to have a quick, is to review your current IPS if you have one, to see if your catalytic capital investment strategy is adequately expressed. And if not, maybe you want to consider amending it to do so. If you don't have an IPS, from my research, I just can say that it's a powerful way to make your intentions both explicit and clear. You can browse through some of the IPS online. If you're interested, you can reach out to find out which are the IPSs shared by Tonic members if you want to read them. I've also included the results from my research in the resource guide, which will be shared at the end of this session, along with other catalytic resources that we'll be discussing today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Adam for the next lesson, and you can take it from there.